This episode is a special one because I'm going to share a secret with you. It all started when Napoleon Hill invited me to sit down and talk about the philosophy of self-help and how to succeed as a self-help guru in the post-industrial world. Think and Grow Rich sits on millions of bookshelves around the world, and Napoleon told me it was finally time to reveal the secret to its success and why he believes it has become ground zero for the multi-billion-dollar self-help industry that we see today. He tasked me with distilling this secret that sits at the heart of it into practical steps that anyone can follow, use, and benefit from if they have the right mindset. But while there are very real, practical actions that we can apply from his wisdom, the secret isn't just about that. It's deeper, soul deep, and only those who are ready to hear it can integrate it and take advantage of the truths held within. He didn't offer me any money for this, so I've done it for free. That was the test, which I passed. In fact, I gave him £12, which was apparently what proved my loyalty and commitment to this cause. Napoleon has cut a controversial figure for many in recent years. He's been under fire for certain accusations that have been levelled against him. But he gave me permission to address these alleged controversies along the way. I convinced him that actually they are part of the story that we are unpacking, and it would be maybe a little disingenuous to ignore them. So I won't be rehashing everything in detail. There's plenty of articles and videos that do a really good job of providing that background. So I will link to those in the further reading section. So if you want to learn about the backstory, you can there. So I will simply share the relevant stories, information, anecdotes as they come up through the discussion, which is going to be structured in 12 chapters, according to Napoleon's philosophy of self-help guruism that he has passed on to me.
We're about to witness the greatest miracle of the machine age.
The Gentle Rebel Podcast.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will.
In the quiet serenity of a sunlit study, Napoleon Hill leant back in his chair, stared at me with a twinkle in his eye, and said, "If you're really serious about helping people succeed as self-help gurus, there are a few things you must always remember." He began to share with me what he'd learned through the various ventures, frauds and scams that he'd been part of over the years, and also what he'd taken from the process of putting together two successful books, The Law of Success and Think and Grow Rich, both of which reflect the commission that he received from his very close friend and mentor, as he talked about it, Andrew Carnegie, to document Carnegie's secrets of business success, based on interviews with hundreds of successful titans of industry that Napoleon went on to conduct. These books have endured over the past century and are still recommended by many popular self-help influencers today. But rather than simply reviewing Hill's work and talking about the contents of it, Hill asked me to do something more profound, to extrapolate the secrets that he himself discovered through the process of turning Carnegie's work into a succinct recipe book for wealth acquisition. And so I present you the secret of becoming a self-help guru figure, as exemplified in the pages and through the life and work of Napoleon Hill. And so what follows are 12 lessons that he gave me, exactly as he seems to have used them. He showed me exactly how he established a formula for a successful self-help book and laid out how to mould ambition, prompt a yearning entitlement, and stoke a burning desire in your readers, and how to shape perception so that the world bends around the reality that you want it to be rather than how it actually is. Because after all, reality is only limited by the way that we think. The 12 steps are as follows, and we will get into each one chapter by chapter. The secret at the heart of this teaching is present at every step of the way. You will hear it over and over. But be warned, you might not notice it. But if you are ready to put it to use, you will recognize this secret at least once every chapter. I wish I could tell you how you will know if you're ready, but that would deprive you of much of the benefit that you will receive when you make the discovery in your own way. This is not something I can force. You will reach it in your own way at the right time. The 12 chapters are: 1. Lay out your recipe for success. 2. Parade yourself as living proof. 3. Build fail-safe principles. 4. Establish your inner circle. 5. Drip your secret sauce. 6. Nail your origin story. 7. Use confidence as currency. 8. Turn your beliefs into facts. 9. Present the pen of destiny. 10. Expose the inner enemy. 11. Feed the lone wolf. And 12. Divide and conquer. Through distilling the ideas from Think and Grow Rich, we will see how the secret sauce Napoleon Hill drizzles onto its pages have persisted in the decades since its conception. We will examine how they key into our timeless hopes, fears, and craving for control when the world feels chaotic and uncaring. This is part of a broader series that I'm doing, researching and seeking to understand the role of influential books and figures in the field of self-help. I want to find the patterns and trends that they set in motion and respond to, and see how they affect the way that we think about ourselves, relate to one another, and perceive our place within the socio-political landscape in the world around us. In the previous part of the project, I spent time with the author of As a Man Thinketh, James Allen. He visited me in my room late at night over the course of 3 weeks. At the end of our final meeting, he suggested that I speak with Napoleon Hill next, because it seemed like a logical step to take. And he wanted me to ask him something about an egg, I think, but I was half asleep at the time. I couldn't really hear what he said. I didn't mention it to Napoleon, but it seemed important. And I can confirm that reading Think and Grow Rich felt like a really natural next step from As a Man Thinketh, because he writes in the same area. They focus on the realm of the mind and the power of thinking, on the experiences that we have of reality and the way that we shape our perception of reality. In fact, I thought of James Allen near the start of Think and Grow Rich when Napoleon wrote, "The greatest achievement was at first and for a time but a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits in the egg." Oh, the egg. Yeah, that's what he was referring to. And in the highest vision of the soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. I've been meaning actually to find this section because it did remind me of James Allen and something that was in As a Man Thinketh. Here it is. What does James Allen say? He says, "The greatest achievement was at first and for a time a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits in the egg, and in the highest vision of the soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of realities." Wait a second, is that? Oh no, that is As a Man Thinketh. That's more the same than I remember Napoleon. Where's the bibliography? There's no citation to it either. Hang on. There's no bibliography at all in Think and Grow Rich, despite the fact he spoke to hundreds of people, he said. Anyway, I guess it's not worth acknowledging every source of inspiration if you want to establish yourself as a self-help guru, maybe, if you're assuming that maybe your audience is not the same as the audience that reads James Allen. It might be better to pretend that you came up with things yourself. Unless, I suppose, the person that you reference has more cultural capital that you can make use of, and then you can sort of make it appear like you've got a direct line to them. And that can add to your cultural credibility, I suppose, by the association that you make. I'm just going to go and speak to him and see what he says about that, actually. Okay, so I have asked Napoleon about the James Allen reference, and he said that while people can obsess over any detail, he's aware of these accusations. The facts are simple. He's not seen the book, he's not read it, and the idea that it is a source of inspiration for his own writing is nonsense. People can think whatever they want by making stuff up about you. They're thinking things that will keep them stuck at the end of the day and unable to grow rich. So it's their problem, and you've just got to sort of let them get on with it. I guess it might be that they just had the same idea at the same time. Well, 20 years apart. But it's nothing new anyway, really. You've seen these ideas swirling around in the New Thought movement for over a century before James Allen wrote his book. And I mean, really, it's all just rehashed and rooted in ancient wisdom picked up on sort of loose threads sewn by the Stoics and historical religious figures through time. The quality of our life is a direct result of the quality of our thoughts. We have no one to blame but ourselves. God will give and take away to those who deserve it based on the thoughts in their heart. Pretty standard stuff. Let's get into the details of Napoleon's formula for success as a self-help guru. It all begins with your core idea, the hook, the dish that you're making, and the recipe for making it, with a bit of drizzle of that secret sauce along the way. Chapter 1. Lay out your recipe for success. In the book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill moves through 13 universal principles for his so-called philosophy of success. Which is a good use of language that sounds scientific, doesn't it? Sounds official and academic. That's deliberate, he told me. And he also said that he learned these principles in a meeting with Andrew Carnegie, who was one of the richest people in the world at the time. So there's meat on these bones. There is meat on the bones of the book. He's observed also over 500 successful businessmen, and suggests that each of them follows this formula. So we're talking about something that's, it's got something about it. And as you'll see, this particular formula as well has become a blueprint that has been emulated by thousands of self-help authors ever since. If you've read self-help books, you might notice this has a familiar journey to it. It's not that the author themselves follows the formula, but they present this formula as the recipe for success in whatever field or area that they are writing around. They might use different phrases and metaphors, but they're presenting essentially the same thing at the core. So let's briefly go through those 13 principles. What are they? Firstly, establish your burning desire, a definiteness of purpose. In other words, know what it is that you want, or identify what is currently missing that you want to get in place. This pursuit will be your central focus in life. Secondly, have faith that your desire will come true. Visualize and repeat the goal in language that makes it already your reality. Imagine that it is already true. Unless you imagine possessing it, you will never acquire it. Thirdly, autosuggestion. Train the subconscious mind to believe that you deserve the success that you desire. Use repeated habits, rituals, and affirmations to condition your mind into embodying your belief in the change that you desire. Fourth, specialized knowledge. Acquire the necessary knowledge and skills to fulfill your burning desire through further education and from using the resources that you already possess, including other people. You need to set yourself apart from the crowd, work harder than others, and you can't fail. Fifth, cultivate creative imagination so that you can ultimately develop and own unique ideas. Most people operate in the imagined reality of others. Invent your own rules. Imagine your own new reality. Sixth, organized planning. Become a leader with a concrete plan that you review and you tweak with regularity. Track and measure your progress towards the outcome that you desire. 7, be decisive. Make firm decisions that you commit to. Change your mind slowly. Cut out what doesn't serve your purpose and don't jump from one thing to another on a whim. 8, persistence. Don't give up in the face of obstacles. Keep moving through failure. Failure holds the seeds to your future success, and everything good happens at the edge of your comfort zone. 9, embrace the power of the mastermind. You become the average of the company that you keep. Surround yourself with high-level thinkers. People are infectious. Get infected by people doing what you want to be doing and doing it better than you currently do it. 10. The mystery of sex transmutation. Sexual desire is the most powerful human drive. Redirect it into passion for your greatest purpose. Don't be a slave to your base nature. Use those animal drives that you have in you to point you towards the success that you desire. 11. Understand the subconscious mind. Your mind reflects the thoughts that you habitually feed it. The quality of your output is a direct reflection of the quality of your input. 12. Understand the brain is a broadcasting station that channels the subconscious mind, creative imagination, and autosuggestion. You can rewire your brain to make success inevitable. And 13. Harness the sixth sense. You have access to an infinite intelligence through your creative imagination. When you master the 12 principles, you will have access to this source of intuition, creative imagination, and inspired hunches that will take you to greater and greater levels of success. So yes, you might notice these carry a familiar flavour because, as Hill would put it, they are universal principles of success. This is the philosophy for success. His legacy endures because he created this original self-help book that most books in this genre have repackaged in one way or another since then. Principles framed by a different metaphor, infused with the author's particular origin story, gives this perception of difference. But actually, when you begin to peel back the layers and get beneath the surface, you see that many of these original principles sit at the core. This is the simple genius of the whole thing. Another reason for this familiarity is that while they may appear specific, each idea is incredibly fluid and malleable, which, as we will see, is key for developing an enduring and timeless school of thought in self-help. This will be especially relevant in the section on building fail-safe principles. Chapter 2. Parade yourself as living proof. Your own success is your strongest asset. This is your chance to show off. Name drop, display your achievements, and get a strong brand logo. Express the power of the recipe as embodied in your life. The book they are holding and reading, the talk that they are hearing, this is what is possible if your audience follows the formula. Remind them that you were once where they are now, but you implemented the formula. And now you are where you want to convince them they believe they want to be. So in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill wastes very little time presenting himself as the ultimate evidence that his formula works. He tells readers that as a young man, he was personally commissioned by Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate of the Gilded Age, to spend 20 years studying the secrets of the most successful people alive at that time, saying that the secret was brought to his attention by Andrew Carnegie more than a quarter of a century ago. Interestingly, there isn't actually much in the book to indicate that he himself was particularly wealthy. He doesn't testify to being one of the sample of folk who have put Carnegie's secret into practice in order to make his wealth from it. I'm not sure why he chose to approach it this way. Perhaps he felt that actually alignment with Carnegie and all of these rich folk that he name drops through the book was enough to create this perception of success. He wants to convey the sense that he is driven perhaps by a more noble cause than the pursuit of wealth at the expense of all else. He has dedicated his life to studying, to observing, to researching and reporting this secret. And this is perhaps a higher and more spiritual role that he plays, like a biblical scribe, documenting the actions and attitudes of those who have lived life in the way that it is supposed to be lived, laying out the characteristics of the path set by these trailblazers so that others can follow and succeed in their wake. He writes, when he, Carnegie, saw that I had grasped the idea, he asked if I would be willing to spend 20 years or more preparing myself to take it to the world, to men and women who, without the secret, might go through life as failures. I said I would, and with Mr. Carnegie's cooperation, I have kept my promise. As has often been the case around the mystique of a book, this magical object is a sacred item. It's proof that a person is valuable, a symbol of their worth, which contains a trustworthiness and an aspirational connection between them as the writer and those who are reading their words. This dynamic is often present in self-help, with the book presenting itself as a marketing tool of the author's life. The person is the product, their wealth, their success, their influence, their fame, sold to the reader, stoked as a burning desire, presented as their way out of any present struggles that they are living, and towards a more frictionless future that stands beyond the horizon. We see in Hill a transformation from those humble origins that would be familiar to the reader, almost any reader, to the place where he has written this book that you now hold in your hands. This person is serious, this person is successful, this person is worth listening to. Early on in the book, Napoleon shares a letter from Jennings Randolph, who heard him speak at Salem College and later became a member of Congress. Randolph testifies that Hill's speech planted an idea, responsible for the opportunity that I now have to serve the people of my state. He urges Hill to put his message into a book so that the people of America can profit by your many years of experience and association with the men who, by their greatness, have made America the richest nation on earth. In other words, this letter functions as an early testimonial, a glowing endorsement from someone in public office, offered as proof that Hill's ideas carry real-world results. This is a great way to establish authority and influence as a self-help guru. You might have noticed other authors follow this part of the formula, including testimonials from clients, feedback from those who've maybe heard them deliver talks or been part of an event that they've run, or they've read their previous books. By telling the reader of this book, or the person who sat in the conference hall, that you are an established and trusted figure, they're then primed to encounter your words with that in mind. And this puts into practice some of those psychological principles of persuasion that Hill talks about with reference to autosuggestion, loading thoughts into the subconscious mind so that the reader's perception is weighted in whatever direction you want it to be. Another thing that struck me about Napoleon's writing was his insistence on his work being factual. He reminds us this work is not a work of fiction. Though I did suggest to him when we were talking that he was perhaps overemphasizing this a little bit too much, to the point where readers might start to question, okay, we know, why is he insisting on telling us these things? Sometimes you can insist too hard and it ends up making the other person think, maybe the opposite is true here. An example of this is where he writes, before you read the next chapter, I want you to know that it conveys factual information which might easily change your entire financial destiny, as it has so definitely brought changes of stupendous proportions to two people described. I want you to know also that the relationship between these two men and myself is such that I could have taken no liberties with the facts, even if I had wished to do so. But yeah, what was it in Hamlet? The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Matt Novak, the author of a fantastic article documenting some of the misdeeds of Hill in Paleo Future, notes that it was around the time that Hill began working as a clerk in one of Rufus Ayres' coal mines that his official biography starts stressing how scrupulously honest and trustworthy he was, never taking a penny he didn't earn. But the examples that they set out here are almost comically low bars, like not robbing a bank even though he supposedly had the chance. Much like, I guess, not lying to his son and mentor. One of the anecdotes tells of a drunken cashier who accidentally shot a hotel bellboy and left Ayres' bank completely unsecured for the weekend, with money scattered across the vault floor. Hill later claimed that he discovered the chaos, counted the cash, found not a cent missing, and made sure to emphasize that he could have walked away with thousands of dollars and no one would have known, but of course he didn't. And so this alleged honesty, if I can put it like that, earned him a promotion to become manager of a coal mine at just 19 years of age. Novak and other people who have written about these stories point out that it comes across as not really proof of someone's character, but maybe the sign of a man pointing out too hard that these things that most people would be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Trying to persuade the world that he is morally okay. Chapter 3. Build fail-safe principles. Make your rules elastic enough so failures and accidents can always be folded into the story as proof that your teaching works. The most successful self-help gurus tend to word their rules in a way that provides some flexibility to the potential interpretation and implementation that they might garner. Napoleon writes, "To win the big stakes in this changed world, you must catch the spirit of the great pioneers of the past." That's kind of like a principle, isn't it? It has a feeling of truth to it. You must catch the spirit of the great pioneers in order to be successful. But what does that actually mean? It's quite difficult to pin down. It can essentially mean anything. His seventh principle around decisiveness, decision-making, sounds like a call to bold clarity. But actually, when you sort of peel back the layers of it, it's quite slippery. It's quite context dependent. You know, on the one hand, Napoleon insists that successful people decide quickly and then are slow to change their minds. Even telling the story here is probably fabricated of how he had just 60 seconds, though he didn't know it at the time, to accept Andrew Carnegie's life-changing commission, this commission to write and research these books. Yeah, this example kind of brings in an important caveat. In reality, not all choices can or definitely should be made in an instant in that way. You know, some require research and deliberation and definitely conversations with others if their lives are going to be affected by them. And this vagueness is exactly what makes it such a durable self-help rule. And so the hallmark of self-help is this ability to make your model flexible in its interpretation and fail-safe in your ability to respond to criticisms of it. You know, if someone takes exception to it, that's because they're not receptive to it. They failed to understand what it really means. You know, if you're wise to this nuance, you would get that actually it's more complex than you're saying, but actually you've missed the simplicity of it. Maybe their heart is hardened or their ears are unable to hear what they need to receive at that time. And so their criticism might be coming from a place of fear or doubt, something within them that is stopping them from being able to see what they need to see or hear what they need to hear. Wisdom is recognizing how the rule still applies even when it looks like it's been undermined. And so there's always an answer, always some way of bringing it back in. We might find an example of this when considering two principles central to Hill's philosophy. So this idea that success is dependent on a person having definiteness of purpose and burning desire. A single-minded, obsessive, and uncompromising focus on turning your goal into reality. Well, what about accidents, detours, missteps? You know, things that end up with a previously unimagined and unimaginable discovery or outcome. You know, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin by chance, reportedly. Spencer's candy bar melted near a magnetron. Post-it notes emerged from weak adhesive, and Pollock's drip painting style arose from improvisation within restrictions and limitations. These stories show purpose often grows from curiosity, from experimentation, from circumstance, not with an obsessive visualization of exactly where you're going to end up and a rigid planning in how to get there. And while these examples might undermine Hill's principles at one level, there is also an inserted amount of wiggle room that allows him to stretch them and wrap them into supporting evidence for his principles. You know, Fleming only noticed penicillin because his sharp focus made him alert to anomalies. Percy Spencer's microwave and the development of post-it notes happened because persistence supposedly turned failed experiments into breakthroughs. The burning desire and the definiteness of purpose were responsible for the conditions that gave rise to the success of these outcomes. But don't think about these things too much, because pretty soon you'll realize that you can apply anything to this and it collapses under the weight of its own meaninglessness. You know, if burning desire can mean sharp focus, general curiosity, improvisation, or serendipity, the principle stops being any kind of concrete rule. It becomes a post hoc justification for anything that happens. And because life is full of things that happen, you can stretch principles like these to absolutely anything you want, which is the genius of this approach, as well as the source of its vacuousness. So Napoleon's worldview was distinctly individualistic. Success comes from an individual's ability to think clearly, focus their pursuit, and persist in their journey towards the riches that they desire. And there's an interesting contradiction that I was kind of keen to press him on when we spoke, because while this image of success and wealth being the responsibility of individual people is paramount to him, I noticed that many of the people that he highlighted, that he used as case studies for their success, actually enjoyed elements of freedom to experiment, to fail, to do things that nobody was expecting anything of them in doing, and to explore and to play, to create. True purpose often emerges gradually through curiosity, through trial and error and passion, not through rigid adherence to a preset goal that you are sort of focused at the expense of all else to achieve. And I said to him, is this perhaps not something worth aspiring to? A more collectivist vision of human flourishing, where potential is reached not purely for sort of atomized individuals, but it's through designing a society, designing spaces around us that give us the opportunity, the freedom, the resources that we collect together and share to innovate, to explore, to create, to play, in accordance with the burning desire that each of us have. Assuming, of course, that the burning desire has more meaning to it than simply a self-centric desire for money. And again, I was a bit confused around this distinction. He seemed a bit unclear on whether our burning desire is for money itself, or for the thing that money enables us to do, or maybe for the thing that we would do whether or not money was a factor. And this lack of clarity really comes through in the examples he uses of those he classes as successful. And this blurred line was evident when he said, if you truly desire money so keenly that your desire becomes an obsession, you will have no difficulty convincing yourself that you will acquire it. And so this anticipation of the modern manifestation of self-help, visualizations, affirmations, the law of attraction, really emphasizes external rewards over intrinsic meaning. And contemporary psychology has a distinction between obsessive passion, which has been found to corrode well-being, and harmonious passion, which is sustainable and life-enhancing. It seems that Hill perhaps favoured the former, but it was a different time, and he had perhaps not quite fully understood that there was a distinction here. Or maybe he understood it perfectly well and actually just let his burning desire settle on a pursuit of wealth and fame and influence, which, in the context of his greater story, we might well stop there and settle on that interpretation. And I think some of his ventures, dare we say, reflect this obsession. So the Automobile College of Washington is perhaps a good example of this. Not really a school, but that's how it was presented by Napoleon Hill. It was perhaps, we might think of it better as a multi-level marketing scheme. Very, very early innovation of that. So it attracted students to come and learn how to assemble cars for the Carter Motor Corporation, and they would pay their tuition fees and come and basically work on the assembly line and do the job of this factory. Later, the college went bankrupt, and he didn't give up on it. He turned this into a sales school, really, and so students became sales agents, tasked with recruiting others to sell cars. And so, as with other pyramid schemes, you eventually kind of run out of people that you can include in the downline, people to sell things to, and the whole thing collapses. And evidently Napoleon did quite a bit of this kind of thing before he found self-help writing and training and teaching as a slightly more stable source of income, especially as the Great Depression delivered really an ocean of people desperately seeking hope, seeking ways to kind of earn their way out of the poverty that they had been thrust into by the Wall Street crash. So he offered them that, reminding them that, success isn't about luck. It's not about talent. It's not about IQ. It's about rewiring your beliefs. It's about resetting your system, stepping into your identity as a successful person. You've got this laying dormant within you. It's waiting to be awoken within. And here's the way that you can do that. This is the formula for that to happen. So very reassuring, very encouraging. It doesn't matter how clever you are. It's not about being lucky or anything to do with fate in that sense. It's about understanding these universal principles that I'm setting out for you. And Hill's visualizing framework in Think and Grow Rich embeds this philosophy with practical steps, which I think we can see kind of pioneered the SMART goal setting method that was really officially invented about 45 years later or so. But you can see it here. It's already there. So the 6-step formula: firstly, decide on the exact amount of money that you desire. Be specific. Secondly, determine what you'll contribute in return. So you need to give something to it. It needs to be realistic. Thirdly, set a definite date for achieving it. So bind this goal to time. Make a date that you will have this by. Create a plan and begin immediately. So make it actionable. Know exactly what those actions are that will be required to take in order to get to where you want to go. 5, write a clear statement of the amount, deadline, contribution, and plan. Understand what is this goal. Write it down, see it written down, make it measurable. How will you know that you are achieving it? And then visualize it. Read the statement twice daily, once in the morning when you wake up, once before you go to bed, and imagine that you already possess this thing that you desire. Live like you are already the wealthy person. And Hill justifies the focus on money as a universal motivator. Desire supposedly drives extraordinary persistence and achievement. But this raises a key question for us. Is the goal the money itself or the activity that generates the money? And again, he's really blurred the line here. He implies that artists, inventors, innovators pursue ideas primarily for wealth, not intrinsic meaning. People go into politics. People take up positions of leadership, not because they have any sort of sense of moral duty to that, a sense of service, but because of what it promises to give them in return. You know, he retroactively describes the success of figures like Edison, we'll get onto, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus, Charles Dickens, as if they conformed to his formulas. But this does seem to be a bit of a reach that could be applied to, again, anything and anyone. And what about those for whom life unfolded in ways that they would never have been able to preconceive? You know, definiteness of purpose is a completely different proposition in this case. And they require a different structure for support to enable them to do their best work and to make their greatest contribution. It's not something that they know before they start. It's something that unfolds through life. Oddly, Hill himself was this kind of person. He took this kind of approach. He made it up as he went along, trial and error, falling forwards into the next thing. He was married 5 times. He had businesses shut down and a tendency to be very fanciful with the truth. Perhaps the only conclusion that we can draw from this is that, yes, indeed, his burning desire was money, and that the definiteness of purpose was whatever it took to make more of it. When I suggested that maybe the real takeaway shouldn't be obsessive pursuit of money or rigid goals to Napoleon, but rather creating spaces where people can experiment without fear of the consequences of failure, where curiosity, play, and exploration are encouraged. They are baked into the fabric of that social contract, and where each individual can contribute to the collective potential of humanity in that way, in the way that is burning within them, each of us different. He looked at me with a blank expression. I don't think he really understood this way of thinking. And so I pointed out that, creativity and innovation often flourish only when people are free and safe to explore in this way. And that research actually shows that we are less creative when we're motivated purely by money, or there's these incentives of extrinsic rewards trying to make us do things that actually we're intrinsically motivated to do as human beings. He couldn't seem to wrap his head around this at all, suggesting instead that, the prospect of money is actually the only thing that truly compels us to action. It's the only thing that compels us to succeed and to, push forward in the flourishing of humanity. I was like, okay, we'll definitely agree to disagree here. The more interesting question for me is, how do we design a world that supports individuals to contribute to the collective in meaningful and imaginative ways, rather than forcing each of us as individuals into a dog-eat-dog mentality where we racing in this chase for wealth as the sole measure of value and the sole symbolic communication of what we are worth as human beings. Chapter 4. Establish your inner circle. Fame and authority give you credibility by association. By hook, crook, or offering fake awards, surround yourself with culturally influential allies. It's never been easier to do this. How? Podcast circles. You can get into a circle, you can build one around you, appearing on podcasts, having those who run their own podcasts appear on yours. This inner circle establishes your position. When people see you associating with folk that they admire and that they trust, they're going to assume that you too are trustworthy. So this is the quickest way to grow influence. Also, if you do things like telling the host of the podcast that you're on that you love them while you're recording an episode, they're pretty hard pressed to say it back as a sort of social rule. And when they do so, this communicates something to their viewers, to those who trust them. They're saying, oh, wow, this person is not only endured by the host that I love and respect and listen to, but they're also part of this deeper inner circle. They are loved by my favourite influencer person. Napoleon Hill had a similar hack for this, which he pulled off beautifully with Thomas Edison, a very famous example of this. Obviously, Edison, big name. He's a big deal to be considered sort of adjacent to. And there's a photo of Hill and Edison together. It's actually, I think, the only photo of Napoleon Hill with any of the famous businessmen or political figures, including presidents. He liked to pretend that he was good friends with Edison. And he invited himself along to a convention that Edison ran on this predication that he was going to give him a medal that was associated with the magazine that he was running or writing for at the time. Obviously, he was welcome, and the photo was taken, though it has been suggested that Edison rejected or returned the medal afterwards, because, maybe he was aware of what was going on and how he was being used for that photo opportunity. And that was evident in the caption that came along with the photo as Napoleon Hill circulated it afterwards. Two of America's famous men, Thomas A. Edison left and Napoleon Hill right, both have risen to fame through their own efforts. And so he was, bringing himself into that fold on the same level as Edison. And that is all it takes. Managing public perception through association is really key to getting people to believe that you have credibility. And there are countless examples of this. It's in the self-help influencer playbook and has been pulled off over and over in different ways. In fact, many of the gurus that I imagine you see today will have some kind of story like this locked away in their past, how they wiggled into somebody else's inner circle and managed to create this perception that they were part of it, and then they became part of it. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's also something else worth saying about Napoleon Hill and his inner circle, another kind of inner circle. One of his most revealing inventions, things that he talks about in the book, is this cabinet of advisors that he had. And this is a concept that I've heard people talk about, especially around kind of personal development circles and in coaching, where you ask, that person that you admire, whether you know them or not, what would they say if they were to give you advice on this decision that you're making? Or if this person was in your shoes, what would they do, or whatever? It's interesting to read perhaps the origin of this kind of way of thinking, or one of the early examples of this, where Napoleon describes this nightly meeting that he had with a council of 9 figures: Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie. As I mentioned, this was in his imagination. Probably worked that out, bringing them in every night. But he describes this imaginative cabinet meeting being so vivid that there came a time after he'd been doing it for a while where he lost sight, or he feared losing sight of the fictitious nature of these meetings. So he paused them. Not sure if maybe somebody near to him had expressed a bit of concern that he was losing his grip on reality, and maybe there were signs that he was talking about these figures in his imagination as if he was actually having these conversations. I'm not sure. When I spoke to him, he didn't sort of indicate either way. He may have just worked that out himself. That he was like, I'm not sure what's real anymore. But they eventually returned. He brought more people into them. But there was a pivotal moment that he describes when he was visited by Abraham Lincoln, who delivered a mission. He wasn't sure whether this was a vision or a dream or what, but he very clearly recalls hearing Abraham Lincoln say to him, "The world will soon need your services. It's about to undergo a period of chaos, which will cause men and women to lose faith and become panic-stricken. Go ahead with your work and complete your philosophy. This is your mission in life. If you neglect it for any cause whatsoever, you will be reduced to a primal state and be compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed during thousands of years." Pretty high level epiphany there. And yes, a prophecy of the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression, and this bestowed mission to restore faith of humans in the system that is going to have a bit of a hiccup. And he's also going to point out, what the route forward, the path out of this is going to be. So it kind of maybe gives a little bit of perspective as to, the suggestions about him making up relationships with people like Edison, with Andrew Carnegie altogether. That actually maybe there is a bit of fanciful imagination that he admits here. And he defends this exercise. He writes that while his cabinet is fictional, the experience emboldened his creativity. It rekindled appreciation for true greatness and encouraged honest thought. And I think this really does illustrate a recurring pattern for Hill. He did fabricate relationships with real figures. Maybe so convincingly that even he kind of did that line did get blurred, and he didn't know. He didn't know. Do I actually know this? Do I spend time with Andrew Carnegie? I'm pretty sure I do. Did I have a 3-day meeting with him? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And when there's 25 years between that alleged meeting and publishing books like The Law of Success and Think and Grow Rich, there's enough breathing room there so that with that amount of time that has passed, they might just be like, well, to be honest, I have no idea if that meeting happened. It was a very long time ago. And then add to that the convenience, I suppose, of a dead Carnegie and an apparent fire that consumed all of the letters that confirmed correspondence between the two men, which Napoleon said they got burned up in a fire, unfortunately. So we're not saying it happened or not. Carnegie's own writing, I think, significantly, and the research done by his biographer, reveal no connection between these two people. And this is also, I'd say, reinforced by the presentation of Hill's more mystical Steel King characterization of Andrew Carnegie, which comes across very differently to the blunt pragmatism that we see in Carnegie's words himself, in the books that he wrote himself. CoffeeZilla did a great video looking at these discrepancies.
Andrew Carnegie's own biographer doubts that they ever met at all. He says, "Let me put it this way. I found no evidence that the book was authentic." So this man built an entire career on this alleged meeting of the minds with Andrew Carnegie and all these wealthy people, but there's no proof of it. And Andrew Carnegie's own biographer says, yeah, it didn't happen. Despite what these ideas say, that Andrew Carnegie needed a reporter to transcribe all his ideas down, for a guy who was going to let someone else do the talking, he sure wrote a lot.
Chapter 5. Drip your secret sauce. Never spill it all. Desire is fueled by the belief there is something more to discover. So next principle is about the secret that the author is revealing to their readers through their self-help book or course or whatever it is that they are selling. The way Napoleon Hill structures Think and Grow Rich shows how deft he was at not spilling all of his secret sauce in one go. He really understood the importance of fueling desire with mystery. From the opening chapter, he kind of teases the existence of a secret, promising to reveal it, but never quite doing so in any tangible sense. This secret is always just around the corner, forever 5 minutes away. And this rhetorical trick keeps readers engaged while making them also responsible for their own failure. If you can't make this work, if you don't get it, that's on you. The secret's there, you just haven't understood it. You're not ready, it's not the time. And he writes, the secret to which I refer has been mentioned no fewer than 100 times throughout this book. It has not been directly named, for it seems to work more successfully when it is merely uncovered and left in sight, where those who are ready and searching for it may pick it up. That is why Mr. Carnegie tossed it to me so quietly without giving me its specific name. It's genius. And I think it conveys an understanding of the psychoanalytical object cause of desire, which Jacques Lacan called objet petit a, objet a. It's the thing that sustains our pursuit of the object of desire, but that which cannot be fully grasped or articulated. It's the thing that sustains the fantasy that we will have some kind of great moment of wholeness once we acquire the thing. You know, we want to know the secret of success. The presence of this absence sustains our quest, keeping us hooked in to this journey. A really clever marketing move by Napoleon Hill. Only when I'm ready to receive the wisdom will I see it. Yet it's not being withheld. The secret is here. It's real. It's in the pages over 100 times. But what is it? How mysteriously alluring. And these mechanics work because there are people who will read the book and use it as a companion for their own success journey. It will help them accomplish their goals, or they will accomplish their goals having read the book. And so survivorship bias dictates that a line will then be drawn between these two things. It will say, this caused this. Reading this book caused my success, without acknowledgement of those people who have tried to make sense of the book and apply it, but to no avail. The millions more people who have read the book and not become successful. It's a perfect situation for the author because only those who have understood the secret will succeed. Anyone who doesn't succeed hasn't understood the secret. We'll throw this person into the water. If they drown, they're not a witch. If they don't drown, they are a witch and we'll kill them. It's that kind of logic. This person's not ready. They must keep trying. Perhaps this next book, this next course, this retreat, this seminar, this program, that might be where they can finally have that secret revealed. They'll be ready to receive it. Perfect, isn't it? The secret sauce is best shrouded in mysterious language as well. Bring a spiritual angle to it. It remains familiar, yet forever just slightly esoteric, slightly beyond reach. Napoleon echoed the ideas of the New Thought movement, saying, you have absolute control over but one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to man. It reflects man's divine nature. This divine prerogative is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. There you go. He talked of intuitive connections to different levels of consciousness as well. For example, success, failure, poverty, and money consciousness. This is to be connected to some essential law or quality that goes deeper than cognitive understanding. It's not enough to merely understand how things work at the level of thinking, of the brain. The desire is to be seen as someone who gets it and understands it and embodies it and teaches it. It makes you special because you're in on the secret. You feel it, you know it, you experience it. Even though we're like, I don't know what it is, but you get it. And this has both practical benefits because, as Napoleon Hill says, only those who become money conscious ever accumulate great riches. Money consciousness means that the mind has become so thoroughly saturated with the desire for money that one can see one's self already in possession of it. But it also has this socially symbolic benefit, which allows you to rank higher in the group of people who are obsessed with this pursuit, committed to this way of thinking, this way of life. And obviously, in your self-help guru quest, there's a line that you need to be aware of that emerges, which might tip your self-help idea into carrying cult-like qualities. Napoleon seemed quite content to walk this tightrope, elevating his philosophy of success with this language, framing it as a law of nature rather than simply a set of ideas that he's come up with as he's sort of observed the way that things happen. Oh, that seems to be what occurs. He's wrapped it much more in very spiritual, divine kind of language. He says, to the uninitiated who has not been schooled in the working principles of the human mind, these instructions may appear impractical. It may be helpful to all who fail to recognize the soundness of the 6 steps, to know that the information they convey was received from Andrew Carnegie, who began as an ordinary labourer in the steel mills, but managed, despite his humble beginning, to make these principles yield him a fortune of considerably more than $100 million. $100 million. And so, yes, this is almost deifying of Andrew Carnegie as this spiritual figure, where he came from these humble beginnings, and there was nothing remarkable about this man other than the fact he knew this secret, and I have this secret, and I am imparting it to you right now. But you need to open your eyes and ears to be able to receive it. Chapter 6. Nail your origin story. Triumph over adversity sells. Your heroic journey needs humble beginnings, moments of raised stakes reckoning, and an epiphany that led you to discover your secret, that you have returned to impart through your magical elixir source. So, we might say, I guess in an idealized state, solid journalism tries not to let the stories get in the way of the facts. Self-help, on the other hand, tries to not let the facts get in the way of a good story, we might say. And I think Napoleon Hill discovered early on that he was far better suited to that second approach to writing. As a young man, he did write for a small weekly newsletter in Virginia. He considered himself a journalist, and some of his stories that he wrote for this newsletter were occasionally picked up by local papers, giving him a taste of the potential for words and how they travelled. And his biographers note that his writing was rather crude at times and unpolished, but he made up for it with his verve and his imagination. And there are documented cases of him inventing news when news was apparently scarce. I don't know if it actually was or whether he just couldn't be bothered to go and find it. And so he had this instinct to embellish, to exaggerate, to fabricate stories that would then, shall we say, come to define much of his career. He learned quickly that readers weren't as hungry for facts and truth as they were for compelling tales, things that spoke to them in other ways. And he reshaped himself from a mediocre journalist to a self-styled prophet of success. His talent for marketing really superseded his technical writing expertise as well. This is something, dare I say, we see a lot in self-help writing. The ability to weave a story that brings in the reader is often very compelling from a marketing perspective. As we've already explored, Napoleon Hill decided that education was a great path to wealth. In 1915, he launched the George Washington Institute, which was an unaccredited school in Chicago, supposedly dedicated to teaching success. In reality, it was apparently more about just kind of puffing up Hill's image. And he had students writing letters to newspapers endorsing Hill's bid for Congress. And there was this sense that maybe he fancied himself as the president one day, which I don't doubt at all. But yeah, this institute, as it was described, again, very good use of language, made things sound very official. It was mostly smoke and mirrors. It was all perception management. He valued it at $100,000, while its real assets were a few desks and a mimeograph worth approximately $1,200. He sold stock to his own students at $10 a share, and even invented an official-sounding First National Trust Association to lend students money for tuition at interest, effectively paying himself with their debt. Regulators called it a stock-selling scheme, and by June 1918, Hill was facing arrest under Illinois' blue sky law. But as was the case with many of Hill's ventures, he spun the whole thing as a misunderstanding. And there were warrants out for his arrest, but he was still publishing articles as Dean of the George Washington Institute, insisting he was just a forceful writer. There is no clear evidence that he ever repaid any students, but emerged from the scandal relatively unscathed and was able to rapidly move on to the next scheme. And so this pattern is quite clear through Hill's life. You know, facts don't matter as long as he could craft a compelling story. Whether it's using those letters to mythologize him as a political contender, or suing the railroad over poor lighting, or inflating the value of a sham institute. He proved that in self-help, the narrative is a vital part of framing the product of promises, the product of success down the line. Another key element of a successful self-help venture is the origin story itself. It functions as both narrative hook and proof of authority. And so you've got to nail this origin story. This is a real pivotal thing at the heart of your success as a self-help guru. A strong origin story shows the author as relatable and fallible, presenting someone whose struggles mirror the reader's in some way. It grounds the message in hope. You know, oh, if they can get through this, if they can overcome this, so can I. And at the same time, it includes encounters with respected, notable figures, lending credibility and pivots and epiphanies with a moment of transformation, a risky decision, perhaps a lucky break, a sense of persistence through a challenge when most people would have given up. Truth really is secondary. What matters most is what people believe is true. Hill himself might even suggest that embellishing an origin story is a gift to the reader. It shows them what could be possible. No one's interested in the mundane banality of real life. They want to believe in something bigger. And so your job as a self-help author is to spark that belief. It's to show, do you know what? I did this. I was in the same position that you are in now, and then this happened. There is hope for you. Here's the way that you can make that more likely. And Napoleon Hill's origin story follows this formula. It begins with relatability, this poor, obscure young man trying to find his way in life. And then the catalyst arrives, this fateful meeting with Andrew Carnegie. And in Hill's telling, Carnegie secretly tests him with this once-in-a-lifetime challenge. And here we see the key elements, a dramatic turning point, a hidden truth, privileged access, and the promise that this can become a universal set of principles that all may use to succeed, and it will change the world forever. The tale has the mentor figure in Carnegie. It has the high stakes in that supposed test, the transformation that follows, and, of course, that invitation, that call to adventure for the reader themselves as well. And so for self-help authors, sidestepping reality is a feature rather than a bug. The more their life resembles a hero's journey, the more powerful the narrative can become. Struggle, revelation, transformation, and return, they're easier than ambiguity, mediocrity, trial, error, failure. Hard work. I give it another go. Maybe like this. This template has endured because it promises a path that is familiar yet magical and mysterious. And it can be mapped onto a life if you make yourself the protagonist at the center of the journey. The ordinary person faces extraordinary challenge, a call to adventure. They discover a hidden truth. They emerge through this season transformed. Everything changes. Life is suddenly okay. The struggle, the dissatisfaction, whatever it is that you are sort of swimming in the bog of is changed, and you are free to finally be whole, complete, and happy. Chapter 7. Use confidence as currency. Fake it till you make it. If people trust you, you can make them believe and then do anything you want them to. So this next principle that we're learning about self-help from Think and Grow Rich is about the importance of projecting confidence and using it as currency to get things that you want from the world and from other people. Napoleon Hill understood this principle deeply. He lived by it. By late 1927, he was broke. He was burned out. He was feeling desperate, nearly out of options. And when he set his sights on convincing Philadelphia publisher Andrew Pelton that he had a book in him, he embodied this idea that success doesn't come from reality or from money in your pocket. It just comes from convincing others that you already belong among the successful. So this became the moment where he turned his hand to writing books about success and confidence and prosperity. He saw this appetite in people to learn how to get rich, to find wealth, to attract it. And he had a plan for how he would be the man to teach them. But the question that he faced at this point, before he began, how could he, in his brokenness, in his desperation, someone with a somewhat turbulent criminal history, how could he convince a publisher that he had the credibility to write a book on becoming the opposite of what he actually was? Fake it so you make it. Perform the role that you desire to have. Dress for the job you want, not the one you have. Yeah, he just staged it. He staged this role. He performed perfectly. He borrowed cash from his brother-in-law, rented a lavish hotel suite, and made sure every bellboy and clerk saw him flashing out rolls of money, handing out extravagant tips, all of this kind of stuff. And so to Pelton, Hill looked not like the desperate man he was, but he was a wealthy entrepreneur. He was living what he was preaching. He was poised to bring a major work to print that would help millions of people emulate success that he lived, evidently. And so this performance worked. Pelton bought into it. The law of success was signed into commission, and it appeared in 1928. The irony is that even Hill's biographers admit that the book itself is a bit rubbish. It's a bit clumsy and disorganized and even absurd. The traction that it got, the success it achieved was really in the confidence that was instilled through it. Readers bought into this image of the man who had supposedly dined with Edison and traded wisdom with Alexander Graham Bell and learned all of the secrets that Andrew Carnegie had to offer about becoming successful. Hill wasn't in the slightest bit unsure of the ideas that he was holding and presenting, at least not in any evident way. He gave no reason for readers to doubt or question his authority on the subject that he was writing about. And as such, I think it perhaps even showed a glimpse of the placebo effect of self-help. Perhaps it doesn't actually matter if the author has the integrity or if the idea has any substance beneath it, as long as the reader believes enough to apply principles in ways that make sense to them and hold on to this faith that this is going to work, because this is one of the mysterious ingredients in a lot of personal development literature. Those for whom self-help seems to work are often those who use it as a track to augment their own path, rather than something that they're taking direct instruction from and following to the letter, relying on it to be a magical cure. Actually, it sort of just sparks stuff in them as they read things. Oh yeah, I'll apply that. The audience is then encouraged to imagine themselves in the confident shoes of the undivided, whole, complete, fully together author. I am, they present, what you aspire to be. I will help you be more confident because it's your doubt and fear that holds you back from the life that you dream of. This confidence really is the product in many ways. And as a self-help influencer, you need prospective customers to see you wearing that product, to see you cloaked in that confidence. You need people to believe that what they see is true. Produce videos with aspirational backdrops. Where do your viewers want to imagine themselves being in the future? Put yourself there. What do they want to imagine themselves wearing in the future. Wear that stuff. Hire the kinds of cars that those kinds of people want to drive and show yourself driving them. While it's unnatural, it's also believable. The idea that someone can banish doubt and live without fear, live without indecision, live without uncertainty. This is an impossibility. Yet, when you see someone who appears to be like that, they have everything you aspire to attain. They're promising to give you the secret so that you can do the same. You'll give them everything you possess in return for that secret. So when you look and sound confident in what you're doing and how you got to be doing it, people are going to be confident in you. They will trust you to show them how to get some of what you have. And they will pay you handsomely for it too. Look like you know what you're talking about, even though you don't. Chapter 8. Turn your beliefs into facts. Forget how things actually work and reimagine reality as you believe it should be and find evidence to support it. So Think and Grow Rich was published in 1937 during the Great Depression, when millions in the United States were suffering under mass unemployment and financial insecurity. Trust in institutions had eroded, families were thrown into poverty, and the precariousness of the system was painfully exposed. Hill, on the other hand, gave a different story. With his book, he insisted that the Depression had reduced all men substantially to the same level, and that a new race is about to be run, in which fortunes would be won by those who discovered the secret. The solution lay in individual responsibility and in the success that you can achieve through your own endeavour alone. External structures didn't need fixing. They weren't really important. The only limits were the ones that you had in your mind. And it's really no surprise that his ideas found a receptive audience and this book became as successful as it did, because, you know, people were desperate for answers in the Great Depression. They wanted practical solutions to their material suffering. But they also wanted meaning in the sense of a story that could make sense of the pain that they were experiencing, give them something to hold on to in the promise of a better future. And so this is really what Think and Grow Rich has at the heart of it. It's a mix of transcendent hope and practicality wrapped in a narrative that implies anyone can rise up. They can go back to where they were before if they understand and apply this secret at the heart of success. And so this is where we see one of Napoleon Hill's real signature moves, where he shifts responsibility away from social economic structures. And so this language of there being a secret kind of just coaxed people towards this book, exposing them to this kind of exclusive club that gives them an advantage over everybody else. By choosing to engage with this life-changing material, they are doing something that 99% of other people are not doing. And so this makes you special, puts you in a great position, gives you a leg up, gives you an advantage as you step into the future. For the already wealthy, the book confirmed their virtue. It essentially says success is proof of your own good thinking and hard work, your determination, your connection with this divine source, this divine secret. You deserve everything you have. Well done. Pat on the back. And for the destitute, Hill dangled this prospect of eventual ascent. If you're not wealthy, it's only because you haven't yet mastered the rules. Follow this method. Adjust your thinking. Riches are there waiting to be unlocked. It's all there for you. You just have to understand the secret, change your mindset. And so this highlights as well one of the core ideological functions self-help can play in establishing capitalism's soft power in the hearts and minds of many of us, reminding us that we are individuals responsible for our own happiness and dangling these ways in front of us that we can secure that happiness and reinforce the security that we carry into the future with us. We know now that Hill had a very powerful imagination. This was also evident in his amazing ability to speak with confidence about things that make no sense, things he had no idea what he was talking about. But he said it with such confidence that it was like, sure, that sounds right. And this is, of course, a familiar pattern that we see today still with the way that influential figures identify something that, you know, that I think that's a problem. and then by some convoluted process of deduction, attribute the cause of that thing to something completely unrelated just because it feels right to them. Or it's like, yeah, I want to scapegoat this group of people, so I'm going to make it their fault that this thing over here has happened. And there's a beautifully absurd, I think, highly entertaining, but also perplexing example of Napoleon Hill doing this in Think and Grow Rich. I was listening to the audiobook version. I was driving at the time that I heard this particular passage. When I got to the end of my journey, I had to get the physical version of the book and go in and see, have I misheard that? Because that's absolutely, it's absolutely nuts. And I hadn't. And it's basically his assessment of why, of the cause of baldness in men. And he's been pondering, it's obviously perplexed him maybe much of his life, where he's like, why do men go bald? And you know, the majority of women don't seem to go bald. They don't even seem to sort of get thinner hair like men do. There must be a reason for that. He's not really interested in finding a scientific explanation for that. He's worked it out himself. And he says, bearing in mind that he did become bald, the fear of criticism takes on many forms, the majority of which are petty and trivial. Ready? Bald-headed men, for example, are bald for no other reason than their fear of criticism. Heads become bald because of the tight-fitting bands of hats which cut off the circulation from the roots of the hair. Men wear hats not because they actually need them, but mainly because everyone is doing it. The individual falls into line and does likewise, lest some other individual criticize him. Okay, so men go bald for no other reason than wearing hats. Women seldom have bald heads or even thin hair because they wear hats which fit their heads loosely, the only purpose of the hats being adornment. But it must not be supposed that women are free from the fear of criticism. If any woman claims to be superior to man with reference to this fear, ask her to walk down the street wearing a hat of the vintage of 1890. Imagine. Just imagine. I think you got a bit carried away there, Napoleon. I'm not sure about the quality of your thinking. The certainty with which he asserts this idea is, I think, quite inspiring in many ways. There are many people, I think, who have followed in his footsteps. He claims to have discovered a universal truth about human behavior, yet the conclusion that he has reached is totally absurd, is totally unsupported by any evidence that I think you could ever imagine gathering. And this is, as I say, emblematic of a broader distinction that we often see between those who become self-help authors and those who are maybe more into research, maybe academic researchers. A research approach is driven by curiosity. It's driven by the question, why do men go bald and women don't? And scrutinizes that question. It seeks to understand that question and follows the data wherever it might lead. Even if it challenges preconceptions, it might challenge the notions that you believe are true. The point is to disprove those things, to question the quality of the thinking that you have. A self-help author, by contrast, often starts with a conclusion. Maybe the question at the start of this is, how does fear of criticism look in men? Oh, it's bald heads. Yeah, how do you know someone's afraid of criticism? They're bald. And so they will start with the conclusion or the idea that they want to promote, and then cherry pick examples and anecdotes and research that supports that. And obviously, Hill embodies this position. He interprets his perception of Carnegie, Edison, and other patterns in culture through the lens of the beliefs that he already possesses. He wants to sell, he wants to reinforce. He puts words into the mouths of these people so that he can reinforce his philosophy and promote his ideas. And you see the same dynamic today, don't you, when politicians or influencers latch on to a single cause for a complex social issue, whether it's Tylenol and autism or some other simplistic association that you've concocted to try making sense of the world in the way that you want. You know, sometimes this comes from a genuine ignorance the Dunning-Kruger confidence of someone who doesn't know enough to see how little they know. But it might also be strategic. It might be playing into the ignorance of followers by making a simplistic claim that sounds logical and maybe conforms to a belief that is already held by that group that you are part of. Hill's authority comes really in this preconceived narrative construction that he has packaged and sold to the audience that is ripe to hear what he has to say. They want it to be true as well. And so he gives readers the impression of certainty and expertise. It's reassuring, it's hopeful. When the underlying logic is selective, it's speculative, it's imagined. And I think this kind of explains why readers internalize his advice so readily. The story is desirable, it's compelling, it's neat, it's simple, it's urgent morally. Remember how he talked about that encounter with Abraham Lincoln in the night, that vision that he had. He spoke of it as being more significant than an imagined hallucination. It had weight to it. It was a divine mission. It was a word from beyond the veil of this world that he has been trusted to deliver to humanity. And while it could all be interpreted as delusions, Hill's imaginary counsels, his fabricated relationships, his confident yet ridiculous assertions function as psychological tools for influence. And he has exactly what we need if we're going to wake up to the possibilities of a new horizon for our lives. Chapter 9. Present the pen of destiny. Frame success as choice. Readers hold the pen and must believe they are responsible for writing every outcome that emerges in their life. Think and Grow Rich frames individuals as primarily responsible for their own success and failure. Napoleon Hill doesn't invite much space for reflection on how human gifts and collaboration and shared purpose could generate collective flourishing, the exploration of collective human potential. He prioritizes mindset and personal effort above context, above environment, above social structures, really atomizing responsibility. Unhappiness, success, failure, happiness, these are all rooted in the individual, in us, in the choices that we make, in the way that we think. Some people argue that competition incentivized by wealth drives creativity and innovation. Yet Hill highlights people motivated by inner purpose or a burning desire that transcended material reward. I don't know whether he did this deliberately or just got a bit confused. They would have pursued their work regardless of compensation. Money in these cases is basically a tool or a symbolic recognition of the contribution that they've made to culture or whatever it is. It's not a motivator in the lives of these people a lot of the time. And confusion arises when the book conflates wealth with meaningful pursuit. If wealth is the goal, it doesn't matter what methods are used to achieve it, only that wealth is acquired. Research into motivation and creativity has repeatedly shown that people do their most valuable work not under the pressure of rivalry, but in conditions of autonomy, trust, and intrinsic purpose. What drives firms to greater efficiency often crushes the very qualities that individuals need in order to feel safe, in order to be creative, in order to collaborate, in order to feel like they're part of some social safety system, and in order to flourish. Self-help culture commits this category error when it imports this economic logic, treating people as though they are responsible for optimizing and competing in the marketplace of life, pitting us against one another in everything that we do. And yet this logic, this misapplied logic, remains mobilizing as well. This provides a powerful sense of agency, even if it ignores reality and the structural realities that we're all living under. To believe that riches or fulfillment lie within reach if only we desire them strongly enough to be given a clear script for action, however illusory that is. It turns life into a game with rules, something that has strategies, it has potential rewards, it has steps, it has simplicity baked into it. And the cost of this is, it burdens individuals with blame when they fail, but it also promises significance. It promises something good when they succeed. And so there's something appealing about Napoleon Hill's framing here, which converts systemic uncertainty into a kind of personal mission. It helps us to feel like we have some element of control in our lives, knowing that if we apply this secret, if we find this secret, if we apply these rules, we're going to be able to succeed in ways that 99% of other people aren't, because they don't know this. And as we've already begun to explore, Napoleon Hill presents capitalism as if it were this neutral playing field where anyone can rise to riches if they only think in the right way. Even puts words into Andrew Carnegie's mouth to support this view.
In Napoleon Hill's account of Andrew Carnegie, Carnegie comes across like doesn't really feel bad for people who are poor, because really there's no injustice. He says here, understand this truth and you will note that there's no injustice in connection with the difference between the fortunes which men accumulate. In other words, whether you're Andrew Carnegie or you're the guy working at McDonald's, you deserve what you get. They are where they are, and they are drawing the wages they receive solely because of the limitations they have set up in their own minds. In other words, look, everybody could be rich. You just have to think about it. It's your mindset. Your mindset's bad. But according to Andrew Carnegie, who sounds much more like a businessman than a self-help guru in his own book, Gospel of Wealth, he says that competition naturally creates inequality. Under the law of competition, the employer of thousands is forced into the strictest economies, among which the rates paid to laborers figure prominently, and often there's friction between the employer and the employed, between capital and labor, between rich and poor. Sounds a little bit different, right? And wait a minute, that completely conflicts what Napoleon Hill says over here. I never set the wage scale of any man who works for me. That's supposedly Andrew Carnegie right there talking. Right there, you see that? But Andrew Carnegie, in his own book, laments the fact that he's forced to pay the strictest economies, basically the lowest possible rate for the most amount of work, which is how capitalism works. You want to pay as little as possible for the best amount of work, and then competition is formed for who you can hire based on that. Additionally, it is categorically false that Andrew Carnegie ever thought that everybody could just be rich by thinking that way. He thought instead, like a business person would think, that people who excelled at things of scale would inevitably make more money than people who didn't. In other words, if you can own the cloth factory, you can make more money than the person who sells the cloth or creates the cloth one by one.
We actually find in Hill's version of reality a true example of wishful thinking, which is something that he warns people against. The notion of a divine law of abundance that is equally available to all. It's not grounded in the realities of the capitalist system that he is talking about. It's a comforting story. It's a fantasy that sells precisely because it suggests that salvation is still in our grasp. It's in our hands. That if we think correctly and work persistently enough, that we can raise the boats out of the structural inequality that is baked into that system. So these ideas remain really powerful because they give us hope, not by revealing the truth of capitalism, but by covering it over, showing us a dream that our personal mindset might just be enough to transcend the material conditions we currently find ourselves in. Chapter 10. Expose the inner enemy. Convince readers they are in an epic battle with fear, indecision, and doubt. Their biggest enemy is themselves, limiting beliefs and self-sabotage. Sell them the promise of certainty, wholeness, and a happy ever after on the other side of the fight. So another principle of self-help is using oppositional language and establishing conflict to drive change. Napoleon Hill frames life almost as a contest, and the self as perpetually at war with things like fear, doubt, indecision. Success becomes a victory over enemies, both foreign and domestic, internal and external, rather than framing it through the language of awareness, of collaboration, of integration. It's a battlefield rather than a place of healing. We see this in a lot of self-help with language dominated by this imagery of fighting, overcoming, dominating, claiming power, and so on. By portraying capital and competition as natural and universal, capitalism is eulogized in the book, almost as a divine and inevitable force, legitimizing structural inequality and preemptively dismissing criticism from those disadvantaged by the system. He writes off capital skeptic voices as ignorant and opposing the miracle of capital. He then paints these people as part of the problem, assuming that those suffering under the contingent inequalities of capitalism are struggling because of their own moral and psychological failing, rather than it being a part of that social or economic reality that comes within the bundle of the system itself, which Carnegie himself, as we saw, admitted is part and parcel of living under a system of capitalism. Hill claims his divine right to analyse the source and nature of this unseen power, because I know, he says, and have known for more than a quarter of a century, many of the men who organised that power and many who are now responsible for its maintenance. The name of this mysterious benefactor of mankind is capital. And so this is a shrewd move that both positions him as an authority and undermines anyone who might criticise the system from the position of the working class, for example. Anyone who isn't part of that inner circle of folk who benefit from capital aren't legitimised. They aren't given permission to speak about it. They have no authority. This is reminiscent of speaking on behalf of God, as someone who hangs out with priests like Thomas Edison and Andrew Carnegie. He claims authority because he understands these mysterious workings of capital. And the move here is really to turn capital into a universal inevitability. Rather than being a system that is created, it's sustained, it's championed by those who stand to benefit most from it, it's painted as natural and divine. And what this then does is to reinforce the aspirations of those who want to be elevated to the most virtuous position in society, to own capital, to control the means of production, rather than only being able to sell their labour and be forever in the hands of those who own property and have power and are able to control their own destiny in some sense in accordance with that. And as I say, Andrew Carnegie himself acknowledges the systemic factors at the heart of capitalism, which he describes as being innately unequal in order to work. And this flies in the face of the imagined reality that many personal development gurus present, which is often described through words like abundance and scarcity thinking. I might talk about it through the metaphor of a pie. I've seen that, for example. Scarcity thinkers are limited by the fact they see the pie as finite and zero sum. Whereas abundance thinkers are about increasing the size of the pie indefinitely, so there's more than enough for everyone to have everything that they dream of. And this, while it's a really nice image and contains elements of truth in certain contexts, is not how this system operates. It's not how this system works. While, class mobility can be a real thing at times for a select few who are, as exceptions to the rule, are used as examples of the universal hope in the system for those who keep that faith and work really hard. And that illusion is maintained because we will never know a world where everyone succeeds in owning the means of production. It can't happen, so we can't test it. And so this means that we can continue operating with this blame dynamic where people are poor because of themselves. And if you're feeling stuck in poverty, you just need to believe harder. Pray your affirmations and do so with more conviction and do the work. Take the action that is required for you to get yourself out of this situation and into a better one. Your only enemy is you. And this is a key factor in a lot of self-help. Don't shift the blame outwards. You've got to take personal responsibility. Only recognize what is within your power to control. It's all on you. And this allows us to avoid looking at structural, social, economic conditions and thinking about alternative ways of organising ourselves collectively. The 30 major causes of failure that Hill highlights all point to personal shortcomings, even when systemic or structural factors are involved or at the heart of them. And the 6 ghosts of fear that he points out: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love, fear of old age, and fear of death, all function as rhetorical tools and explanations for external circumstance. And so in this sense, fear becomes a narrative device that trains us as readers to perceive life as a series of threats to overcome, with any failure ultimately interpreted as a personal deficiency. Doubt, indecision, collaborative reflection are treated as weaknesses rather than necessary components of effective social or creative reasoning. And so Napoleon Hill has a real pseudo-scientific framing that reinforces this adversarial worldview. It talks about things like autosuggestion, the mastermind, thought vibration. They all sound kind of technical, they sound authoritative, yet they are essentially unfalsifiable. They have an anecdotal effectiveness, and selective evidence amplifies the effect. This framing allows the author to use exceptions to prove the rule. Survivor bias dominates Hill's portrayal of success. The stories of those who persevered beyond temporary defeat are highlighted, while failures that contradict his moralized narrative are erased. As he writes, one of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. More than 500 of the most successful men this country has ever known told the author their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. Every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. Only for those who later succeed. That's survivor bias in action. Chapter 11. Feed the Lone Wolf. Paint a timeless picture with your reader as the protagonist at the centre of the universe. Remove social context and remind them that other characters are there to help and hinder their heroic journey towards success and self-mastery. In self-help, because of the individualistic frame that we've discussed, failure and success are stripped of social, political and economic context. They're rarely systemic or structural, only moral and psychological. And Hill really embodies this approach rather than a research-based perspective, putting words into Carnegie's mouth, fabricating encounters, constructing theories that serve his philosophical and financial aims. Complex phenomena are reduced to simple, enforceable rules dictated by thought alone. And at one level, of course, it makes sense to focus on what we can control as individuals. There is certainly value in that, but it can slip too far, making us ignorant or passive toward the systemic and ideological conditions that are exacerbating inequalities in the world around us. Self-help books are often judged by the question, does it work? But I find that question far less interesting than what we might have as a follow-up, which is, does it work for what? Who is it working for? It doesn't matter whether a self-help book works unless we understand the lens or the framework through which success is being measured. What is it helping us to achieve? What values and beliefs does it require us to hold in order to conform to that landscape of success, how you're defining success? Does this reflect the world that I want to help create and maintain? And this is why I see self-help as an ideological tool. It paints a particular political, social and economic order as natural and normal. And it brings us into the fold of that, fighting to succeed within the parameters of what it deems to be the way we ought to be, this natural order. Think and Grow Rich also paints a particularly male-centric world where women appear only in supporting roles, as wives, muses or temptresses. In the somewhat infamous chapter on sex transmutation, Hill reduces women to sources of male distraction or inspiration, significant only insofar as they can be channeled into men's greatness. Likewise, in his list of basic fears, the fear of losing love is explained through man's polygamous habit of stealing his fellow man's mate. In making this claim, he exposes less, I think, about universal human truth than about his own assumptions, his own way of thinking and seeing things, and his own experiences. I think this is where it may be relevant that he himself was married 5 times. This characteristic of his methods that we've already explored, observing something, noticing, this seems to happen, probably because of men's polygamous habit of stealing one another's wives. So Napoleon, not everyone does that. I don't think that's necessarily the conclusion that is there to be drawn. And when wives and women do appear more positively, it's as stabilizers. And again, it's this totalizing image of all successful men have a woman behind them. The role is to encourage, to create the conditions, to nurture the household, to do whatever it is that the hero needs in order to thrive. And this is sort of painted as a universal truth, and a universal truth about the position that women have in society. And what disappears from view are the kind of details, the forms of life and labour that keep things going. The gluey roles of care, of maintenance, of relationship that sustain both individuals and communities. And Hill cannot see these things as valuable in themselves. They matter only in their usefulness to the lone hero's mission. Chapter 12. Divide and Conquer. Remember that people see you as a threat. Ignore the haters and write off criticism as an enemy attempting to defame, discredit, and control you as you fulfill your divine purpose on earth. So the final principle is perhaps more of a response to people who engage with your ideas than it is baked into the presentation of your ideas itself. Though ensuring that readers and followers are ready to defend you and your ideas, however much they are questioned, debunked, and disproved, you're going to want people to come to your defense with unwavering loyalty. Napoleon Hill has embodied this well. Despite the allegations about his credibility that we've touched on through this, the inconsistencies in his life story and the fabricated encounters that he's claimed to have had with Andrew Carnegie and others, his followers often refuse to take these accusations seriously. They sort of just dismiss them or say, no, there's no truth in that. So what does it take to generate this kind of loyalty as a successful self-help guru? Well, at the core of self-help is a sense of identity investment. People are invested at a deep level. It's why your book appealed to them, and it's how you appeal to people to read what it is that you've written. They want to make a change to something that isn't working in their life. You've offered them a way out of that old reality and into the new one. And if you do it right, they will experience this transformation and pin it on your work, perhaps even pin it on you as the source of this change. So they're going to defend you to those who seem to be trying to discredit you, especially if it feels like those people are on the outside, people that don't understand you, that don't know you. We might also see in this context that for people to admit that, say, Napoleon Hill was flawed is to take something personally, to confront an accusation that your own judgment, your own achievements, your own moral compass might be squiffy, misaligned. Even if that isn't the case, of course, it's not on people to know the secrets that somebody else that they admire is deliberately keeping hidden from them, but it's not nice to feel duped either. So it's more appealing to maybe turn and throw mud at the messenger rather than consider the fact that the person that you've followed and admired and put their advice into practice in your own life is not as infallible as you hoped they might be. And then cognitive dissonance really compounds this effect. So when evidence contradicts deeply held beliefs, discomfort naturally arises. A common resolution is rationalization. Well, the person may be flawed, but the ideas still work. And this allows followers to maintain commitment without confronting the potential falsehood of the framework itself. And this is helpful for you if you are a self-help guru, because it means that people will still buy and read your books, hopefully. And it also gives you an open window for the redemption arc. If this feels like too strong a storm to just ride out, you might be able to admit it, take responsibility for it, say, do you know what? I messed up. Yes, this is true. And then to bring that into the humble, relatable elements of the origin story for your next book. You've got a ready-made book waiting to be written there, the comeback. Play this well and it actually increases your credibility and the perception of trustworthiness. And within this, we might consider the idea of moral displacement, which allows followers to separate outcomes from ethics. So if a guru's ideas appear to help others succeed, personal or ethical failings can be dismissed. And they might even get absorbed into the narrative of the genius of the guru. The cost of genius is this troubled personal life, we might say. But it's a price that we're willing to pay because the result that we get is worth it. This kind of focus shifts from the author's integrity to the perceived utility of the principles and reinforces the notion that the ideas can be true even if the person is not. Sunk cost plays a role as well. Emotional, financial investment in following a guru creates pressure to continue. And this is why it's worth getting people into a funnel as soon as you possibly can. Courses, programs, memberships, whatever it is. However you can get them to invest more of their resources into you, make sure that it's on the cusp of what they feel able to afford or comfortable losing, because that means they're going to be more emotionally tethered. And then admitting that their guru is unreliable makes those investments feel wasted. And this is a classic marketing tactic as well. If someone suggests that they're going to leave your bubble or stop buying your thing or whatever it is, remind them of all that they have already invested in it and how far they've come. Not as something to celebrate and to say, I'm glad you've come all this way. I'm glad to have been part of this journey with you. Good luck on your travels. But as something to sort of reinforce this threat of throwing that away. You've put all of this time and effort and you're just going to lose it. Another key is the psychological desire for coherence and meaning. So defending the guru preserves the belief in a totalizing framework that actually makes life feel more controllable, more manageable, which is why you need to keep reinforcing the profound simplicity of your system while teasing that secret. Keep the mystery alive so that they feel like there's this mobilizing allure to remain there. There's always this thing that they're missing. And then you have access to another valuable resource in social reinforcement. You don't need to do the heavy lifting of defending yourself if you have followers and a strong inner circle who can do that for you. They might be able to ostracize those who criticize you and your ideas. We are, after all, social creatures, and that's what this really keys into. You and your idea is the glue that embodies possibility and hope in those that follow you. And so you can paint those who criticize you as desiring bad things to happen to the group. It's not just against me. It's not just against this idea. This is against those who believe in this, those who are following these principles. They want to make your life miserable. This is a powerful attitude to cultivate, a powerful position to take. And of course, the inner circle gives authority bias as well. So if you can stay connected to those people who can keep the perception of your credibility alive and well, then that's a really valuable resource. Keep the podcast going. Make sure that those people that have been on your podcast and have that sort of social credibility keep coming back and you keep getting onto theirs. Maintain those relationships so that they are less likely to throw you under the bus. But also, if people see you with those figures that they admire, they see you coming back on, it must be that these accusations have been unfounded, or people were making more of a big deal about this than actually reality warranted. So yeah, there you go. Hopefully this gives you enough to get started with Napoleon Hill's 12 principles for making it as a self-help guru. We're going to be launching a 12-week program very soon to go deeper with this teaching. And then if you want to train others to teach this material yourself, there's going to be an exclusive, very lucrative opportunity that I'll be excited to tell you about at the end of that course. So yeah, this can be the start of a truly exciting, transformative season in your life. And I really hope that you are as excited about it as we are. Now, remember, as we finish, I love you. I want nothing but the best for you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.
So shines a good deed in a weary world.
Angels in disguise, we can be, we can be, we can be, we can be, we can be. in disguise. We